If you think of the solar panel and the charge controller combined together as a battery charger, like you'd normally charge a car battery with, you get the principle of how it works. The solar panel harvests the sun's energy at a certain voltage which is unregulated. It's around 20 volts on a good day, and 100 watts give or take on full sunlight pulls you in, if you're lucky, 7 amps. Can really drop down on overcast days to virtually nothing, and obviously it's dependent on how much your battery needs to take in. The charge controller itself converts that 20 volts, and these figures are nominal. It can be plus or minus, as you'll see when I show you the voltage depending on the weather. But plus or minus 20 volts coming in is then transformed down to the voltage that you need to charge your battery. That is the prime purpose of the charge controller. It is just converting 20 volts down to 13.5, 14 volts. That's what it's for. There's two types of charge controllers that we're interested in with campervans. Pulse width modulation is the one that's fitted to this van, and basically they're cheap and cheerful. They do the conversion, but they don't make the most of the voltage that you're given. So they'll convert the 20 volts down to the voltage, but they won't make the most of the voltage to create as many amps as possible. So it could be that with your 100 watt panel on a really good day you can pull 7 amps, but with a pulse width modulation charge controller you may only get 5 or 6 amps, sometimes even less. In overcast conditions it works less efficiently, whereas with an Mppt charge controller, that is the most efficient. It pulls the most amps out of the voltage as it can, and that stands for maximum power point tracking. The only difference is they're a lot more expensive, but they do a better job. On an overcast day or on a sunny day, it pulls as much ampage as it can out. Now, I'm not going to confess to be an expert. I just know what I know through years of doing this. The PWM chargers, if you're on hookup all the time and you very rarely use 12 volt, perfect for you. If you go off grid enough, you need to make the most of the voltage that you have. So I always change to an Mppt. Right, so as supplied with the van, this is a 10 amp PWM charge controller. 10 amp meaning that's the most input it can handle and convert. You're never going to get that out of a 100 watt panel anyway. Best you can hope for is 7 amp, so you've got a bit to play with. You could expand on it, but you'd be on the limit. What I may do in the future is expand the solar array on the roof from 100 to maybe 150 or even 200, depending on the size I can get away with. I've measured the roof to see what I can get away with, but with solar you need to do it in stages. I know changing the charge controller will benefit me, and fitting an additional battery may benefit me, but a second solar panel is cheaper than a second battery. So it's all about keeping your battery charged up. We just need to work in stages to see how we go. I'm going to change the charge controller first, see how we go, then maybe add a second panel, see how we go, and then third and final we'll add another battery if we need to. But obviously the battery is the most expensive part of it. You know, you're talking 200 quid for a decent battery. So we're going to go in stages and just see what we need to do. First job is going to change this charge controller out, so we'll do that now. So what I'm going to show you is just the difference between input voltage from the panel and output voltage to the battery, just to give you a rough idea of what the solar panel does. I know from experience you get about 20 plus volts coming in and 13, 14 coming out depending on the weather. So I'll set the voltmeter to 20 volts first. Right, so this is your solar charge controller that is supplied with the van. This one has the option to charge 2 batteries. You'll see battery 1 isn't connected. That would be taken to your van starter battery should you want to mess around and route the wires. That is your actual feed in from your solar panel, positive and negative, and that's your feed out to your leisure battery. What I'm going to show you now is the voltage difference from coming in to going out. I know from experience that a 100 watt panel throws around 20 volts out, and then transforms it down to charging voltage of about 13-14 volts. So we'll show you that now. Yeah. So if you can see, the charge coming in from the solar panel is 17 volts. It's a very overcast day, but still 17 volts.
It was showing 20 earlier on.
Yeah, it was showing 20 earlier with the sun. If you flick up to the panel, you'll see what I've done. All I've done is got the multimeter plugged into that, so you can see the voltage from that. Okay. That's the voltage coming out of the charge controller to the battery. You can see it's supplying nearly 14 volts. And again, same thing, the meter is connected in to the positive and negative on that. Right, we're on some ladders, see the top of the van. There's your solar panel at the minute, existing 100 watt Truma panel. And you can see where it's going in through that cable gland entry into the cupboard where the charge controller is. This is just going to be, hopefully, I've measured this roof area for expansion purposes, maybe at a later date. You could also put another 100 watt one at the front, I think, but again, we'll see what we need based on what we use. So one thing we can't stop is the solar panel is always going to be producing voltage, apart from when it's night time, obviously. So when I disconnect that red and black wire, they're going to be live in effect. There'll be 20 volts coming down them, which it ain't going to do nothing, but it's not the best thing. If they touch together, you could damage the panel. So the first thing you need to do is pretend it's daylight. So I'm going to throw a blanket over the top of the panel. Right, so blanket over the solar panel. It'll now think it's dark and it won't be producing anything. If you look at that now, this light is blinking anyway, which tells me there's no voltage coming through. But if I connect the voltmeter up, you can see we've got no volts coming through.
So if we go round to the 2 volts, you can see there's a tiniest little amount.
Tiniest little amount, but there's nothing.
Oh.
So that's off now. Right, so one thing you need to remember, although you've disconnected the voltage feed in, the voltage feed out is obviously dual direction, if you like. This is still live. Must just be the way that this is wired. But this is still live, so you've still got 13 volts here. So as I disconnect these, they're going to be live. So what I am going to do is disconnect the van leisure battery, just so that we've got no chance of blowing any fuse or anything on this. Right, so we're connected up now to the outward feed, and it's not bleeding back. We have got no voltage. We are hook up off, leisure battery disconnected. There's no voltage at all being produced by the solar panel or feeding back from the van. What we also have done is made a note of what the wires do, even though we can refer back to video, just in case you're doing this. Take a photo or make a note, which is your positive and negative feed in and out. Right, so that's the charge controller out. I mean, you can't tell this by film, but there's no heatsink on the back. It weighs as much as a basket of soup. There's nothing to it at all. So this is the charge controller we've gone for. EP Ever. Use these in all my vans. This is a 20 amp one, which will allow me to pull in obviously 20 amps. Now, as I said, I'm never going to pull 20 amps in from a 100 watt panel, but the idea is if I do expand, we've already got the charge controller in place, and for the sake of 10 quid more than a 10 amp one, it wasn't worth not having it. You can get all singing and all dancing Mppt charge controllers, but from my experience, I don't need to know on a phone what it's charging at, what it's doing. I just know that they charge. With this, you can see if you just look at the display what it's doing, and that's all I need to know. Don't need to Bluetooth it up and find all that out. I think that's just a gimmick, in my opinion, to get more money for something that's not going to do any more. These are perfectly acceptable and they do the job. So straight away, looking at that, you can see there's a size difference. It's also a lot heavier, and the cooling fins on the back will let you know that it's obviously going to produce some heat because it is in effect a transformer. These buttons will run you through exactly what you need to know. I'll show you that when it's connected up. On the original charge controller, obviously you've got no clue what's happening other than a light flashing, but this will actually tell you voltage coming in, amps coming in, etc, etc. So we'll look at that now. Got to do it this way because it's just more awkward when it's mounted on the wall to actually fit the wires in. Right, Right, so we're all connected up on that. Obviously there's nothing showing yet because there's no voltage coming in because we've got the panel closed. Just in case you're wondering, this here is an accessory output. That's 12 volt metered out if you wanted to run a cigarette lighter or another USB or anything 12 volt out of that. That's what that's for. The COM section there, that's where you plug in the all singing, all dancing, Bluetoothy thing if you want that, but you don't need it. Right, here we go then. So it's all in, powered up. The problem we've got now is we're parked in between two houses. The solar panel is flat on the roof. There's no sun in the sky. It's quite late in the afternoon now, but we know it's working. We've got 13 volts showing in the battery. We're just producing 0.1 of an amp. Did you just see that then? Literally the sun must have just broken cover. So we're producing, but we're not actually. There's a nominal amount, and of course we couldn't show you that on the PWM because there was no way of knowing if we were producing. All these are just figures that don't matter. I haven't read the book, but basically all you're interested in is your voltage out and your voltage coming. 14 volts is all that's coming in from the panel because we're in the shade stroke low light. Again, no amps now. If I just throw some lights on, you'll see the panel voltage drop. Drop down to 12.9, so we're drawing off now. There we go. Yeah, this is just really showing you the problem we're up against. There's next door's house, there's our house. The van is in between the two. Over that way is east, that way is south, so the sun is already down past all the houses, so we very rarely get any sun down this side apart from in the summer when it's high in the sky. This is the next morning. It had gone a bit dark when we were fitting this, and we were drawing nothing. Also the van had been on hookup all day, so the battery was charged. I've got a bit of sunlight out there, and you'll see in a minute it's pulling in a little. I've got to go through the book and see what all this means, but it doesn't matter to me. You can see 0.6 of an amp coming in. But like I say, the sun is very low in the sky on a flat roof van. Battery 12.8 volts. 0.7 amps coming in there. So same direction as yesterday. You can see already it's about 10 in the morning. The sun is slowly making its way south, and already we're going to lose it behind that house there. So yeah, where we're parked, we don't get much solar in this time of year. But you can see how low the sun is in the sky. That bouncing off a flat panel is never going to be any good. On my old T5 campervan, at least with an elevating roof, you could park it south when you were on a site, and at least you'd get a bit of sunlight. You can see now the sun's already gone behind that house. This is the van from the other way. You can see how little the sun is ever going to catch that. So yeah, we're viewed now, we're facing north now. Sun is directly behind me. So yeah, with a flat roof like that, low light like it is, I've no idea how many amps we would have got from a PWM, but even the Mppt is struggling, but it's still pulling something. So there you go. There you go then. Quick change of the solar panel, charge controller. Keep tuned for another video. Catch you soon. Ta-da.